Good morning. Welcome to Friday morning webinars. For those of you who are watching live, you guys, and for many of you who are watching this on the campus. So it's September, you can tell by the weather, and it's back to school. And so the talk today is really about the discipline it takes to be an actor. I can't stress, and if you're an actor who works with me live or on the campus, and if you're an actor who's working and aspiring to be a working actor, I cannot stress enough how much discipline it takes to be an actor and how much work it is. I think there are quite a few people who want to be or consider that they possibly want to be actors and don't really understand what it is that we do for a living. And then when they trip into an acting class and start working, and they start realizing just what a bucket load of work acting is, that it takes an insane amount of discipline and a massive amount of passion. So I want to reiterate something that I say several times in my videos and things, which is the concepts of laziness and discipline. Laziness, being lazy, is the child of fear. The reason why somebody's lazy is because they're afraid. And so I hide in my basement. I don't really get that thing done. I never really bother taking that class, or I don't ever write that thing I was supposed to, or I don't have the wherewithal to do this homework that I said I would, or I'm not meeting my partners, or I'm not putting on a play, or whatever it is really because you're scared. And the laziness is the child of the fear of failure and or success. So it's much easier to just not do anything than to actually step out and get it done. And so when I meet somebody who's quote unquote lazy or indisciplined, really I'm just meeting somebody who has a terror going on inside of them. And once you deal with that thing and you say, what are you afraid of? Like, you're afraid of possibly being humiliated or falling on your face, or not succeeding, whatever that means, or not getting where you want to go, or you're getting not achieving your dreams. Like, let's work through that. Because then as soon as you take that first step and you go, oh, I'm just going to go for it, then suddenly all the discipline comes. Because the second concept is discipline, because discipline is actually the child of joy. And you show me a disciplined person, and I'll just show you somebody who's really enjoying themselves. So somebody has an outrageous passion and a proclivity towards playing the violin, and they're going to be playing the violin, practicing for 6 or 8 hours a day. They're going to be somebody who loves playing the violin. And some of it is painful. And you're doing your scales, and you're doing arpeggios, and you're doing your chromatics, and you're doing harmonic, melodic, minors, and it's like, it's painful, but you're doing it because there's a joy in the process, and there's a joy in the development, and there's a joy in the investment of it. Not just towards one day I'll be able to achieve something great with this, but in the now, in the work, I'm really enjoying this process because it brings me pleasure. So I go, okay, so let's talk about acting. Acting is the art form of life. And so if you're scared of life, if you're scared of change, if you're scared of failure and or scared of success, if you're afraid of being humiliated, ashamed, or embarrassed, all of this is going to happen. So it's not that these things aren't going to happen. They are going to happen. It's, are you afraid of it, or can you just live into it? Then you're going to create lazy patterns. Whereas if you just love the whole concept of life, and you want to explore life and understand life and experience life and live into it, then you're going to have a joy. And so, I mean, sometimes I hear actors go, oh, I hate memorizing lines. I just hate memorizing lines. And you're like, it's a drag. It's work. But it's a joy, because it's like I'm walking my dog, and we're going down the road, and it's 10 o'clock at night because I got this audition that I need to do for the next morning, and the words are insane. Like, I said something about the Stonebridge Jam and Nut Butter Company and all this kind of stuff, and I'm having to memorize this ridiculous Hallmark movie thing. And I'm with my dog, and I'm like, it's a joy. It's like you're a joy. Like I'm celebrating the ridiculousness of having to memorize these stupid words, and because it's fun to dig into things. So the discipline is a matter of the celebration of the experience of what you do. And what we do is the celebration of the experience of life. And this is where we get into it. Acting is the art form of life, as I say a million times in every single video and every webinar I've ever heard. So if you are experience life at the full and you're excited by it, then suddenly life becomes your entire research project. And that's where we start with back to school. What do you need to do as an actor? Because life is your petri dish. Life is welcome. Life is your research project. So in you, outside of you, and in the macro society around you. So we'll go out to in. Researching the politics of human connection, researching sociology and researching psychology and researching how people connect and interface with other people, and understanding the brain and understanding the neuroscience of emotion and behavior, and understanding the evolutionary biological reasons as to why people behave certain ways that they do, and understanding how religions and nations and socioeconomic groups all interface with each other. And like in the big picture, like what is this world and what are people and why do we do it? And so you should be consistently, constantly researching that. And that includes listening to NPR news programs and getting in-depth coverage and ideas of politics and human behavior, listening to podcasts like The Hidden Brain or Here's the Thing, watching documentaries. I mean, the amount of research material is infinite, really, because we're talking about life and it's anything. And so how people think about people is really what you got to keep studying, and it's all about people and how people deal with people. And the next would be reading histories. And so, you know, I'm obsessed with reading history, because history is just story of how in different perspectives and different narrative understandings and different circumstances, because we're very different people today than we were in the 1600s, than we were in the 1300s, than we were in 300, than we were in 300 BC. Like, we biologically are the same, but we create different narratives. And so those human beings were living in different narrative cultures. And so, like, you know, I just read this book on Tudor England and the rise and fall of the Tudors, which was fascinating. And I'm reading Ken Follett's The Pillars of the Earth now, and I just read Papillon, which was fantastic. So you're like just constant reading for no other reason than to research how do people react and why. And one of the reasons why I want you guys to read history books is because in history, I'm going to reiterate this, is you get to see that the perspective that we're in now, the cultural environment that you live in now, is just the perspective of now. And we think of it as this is the way it is. But, you know, in 1400, how we treated each other in a family unit was very different. And that's the way it was. And then how it's going to be is going to be different. So it kind of gives you a perspective on, there's a narrative going on in my life and in the world. And what is this narrative? So you have this big macro, the large into the micro. That's not a wound. That's a tattoo a child gave me. It's a sun face tattoo. The big picture of humanity. And then you get the smaller version, which is outside of you, how people deal with each other. So your research work becomes the people around you. And you are putting yourself in any possible situation you can where you can listen to people's stories and also listen to people how they react. So you were keeping a logbook. I had the logbook to show you guys. You're keeping a logbook. I don't think I have it on. Black Mead thing book or something, or if you want to be a little bit more romantic, it has a Shakespearean cover, whatever, but it's blank pages and it's a book. And you are going to write down everything that you come across that makes you go, wow, that's cool. What an insane choice. Or why would they do that? Or that little bit of behavior is fascinating. And so You're at a dinner party, go to dinner parties. When you get invited, go places. When you get invited to something where you know nobody, throw yourself into that pool. And it's a big research project. Write it off. I mean, on taxation, like, write it off. You're bringing a bottle of wine to a house where you don't really know anybody because somebody invited you to this party. Buy a nice bottle of wine and write it off for your taxes, because it's a research project. And you're going and you're listening to people talk. And don't try to convince people of your opinions. Stop it. That's not your job as an actor. Don't walk in and into a party full of Trumpian Republicans and try to teach them about, why Hillary Clinton should be president. Instead, listen and go, really, really, oh, really, 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 and just absorb, and take. If you're going to change the world, you're going to do it through your art, not through trying to convince some guy at a party. So listen carefully to why they talk the way and how they talk the way they talk, and then ask them their stories. Part of your homework is, what am I doing today as an actor? I'm like, find somebody and take them to dinner or lunch, again, write it off, and then ask them, so what's your story? Like, where'd you grow up? What happened? My neighbor, Friedemann, is a German man, fantastic, lovely guy. And he was born and raised in the very, very early days of post-war Germany. Man, the guy's got some serious perspective on life. And he's such a good guy. And also some of the things he says are like, wow. And I'm like fascinated by it. I'm fascinated by him as a character. I'm fascinated by him as a human being. And I'm fascinated by the stories he's telling and the choices he's making. So study these things. Now, in a more micro way, while you're studying people, study their behavior and absorb it. And this is a very important exercise. When you see somebody's behavior that's interesting, they do this thing, or they have this tick, or there's something about how they hold their body, or the way they take a pause. My uncle, Bruce, everything he says is kind of like this, and he opens himself up and goes, we were just in Cairo and they have the pyramids, and there was and I'm like, it's so I've practiced my uncle over and over and over again, because what my uncle's doing is he's a bon vivant. And I go back to his story, and his story is he's the child after my grandmother lost a child. So he was the third boy, but he was actually the fourth, and the one in the middle died. And there was something about that made him want to be the one who gets noticed. And so he was a bad boy in the 70s, and then he matured into being a wonderful man and a father and a very successful businessman and all this stuff. But he still got that, like, have a beer, let's talk, and he's an open guy. So when he talks like this, and what he's doing is he's waving you into a party with him. And that's the behavioral aspect. Now, he doesn't even know he does it. But I was practicing it, and then I did an impersonation of my uncle to my father, and my father died laughing, because that's what he's doing. Now, I practiced that. I put that in my logbook. That's one person out of 7.3 billion. And you should be doing that with every person you can. Try to figure out their behavioral me. You should, this is going to be weirdly narcissistic, but rewatch this webinar after, and then go, what's the Matthew thing that Matthew does? Whatever it is, I don't know. And then figure it out. Because then one day I'm going to be on a film or feature film or television show or a Hallmark movie or whatever, and the guy's going to be a bon vivant, and he's going to be a good guy, and he's going to be inviting the son-in-law into, his almost new son-in-law into the wedding party, and come on, and I'll go it's going to be great. We're going to have to, and then my uncle's voice will come out, and I won't even be aware of it. It's just that I've researched it and I've impregnated that in my brain or my consciousness. And now the concept of a bon vivant who's waving people into the party is going to be tied to that behavioral aspect. That's one thing you should be doing. And then emotional backstory. You're studying people and you're listening to their emotional backstories, and you're going, what's the trauma or the joys or the shames or the successes or the achievements or the losses or the pains that they've been through? And you're studying their narrative, their story. And the reason why you're doing that is because now also studying my uncle, and he's the fourth, but he's the third, but really the fourth, and they lost the one, and his mother kind of was probably depressed, and I know my grandma was depressed, and so I look at all that and I think about how that affected him and what happened to him. Now I'm doing scene analysis in a class, and a character comes along and I go, whoa, I understand that. And I may not even be cognitively aware that it's my uncle, or it's the homeless guy that I took to lunch, or it's that accountant that I decided to study while I was having a meeting with my accountant or whatever. It might be 5 years later, I'm breaking a script down and then my understanding of the scene analysis happens. But that's because I've been listening and researching people. People sometimes ask me, how come, this is going to sound vain, but how come I'm so good at scene analysis? And I think the answer is practice, which we're going to get to. But also, I listen a lot to people. I study the world a lot. And so the stories that we break down are just reflections of stories I've already heard in the real world. Now, your micro research, of course, is yourself. So why did I react that way? Or why did this affect me this way? Why is that a trigger? Why is it that when I see little children performing in a play, I break into tears? Why? I mean, I was watching School of Rock and I cried when Jack Black had his kids on the stage. I was crying during School of Rock. And I'm like, what the? And then you go, why is that? Now I know why that is. It's because as a child, I was never allowed to express myself. And to watch little children express themselves is something really beautiful to me and foreign. And that's why it affects me as an older man. And so I've been through the reasons why. So I research it. And you log that down. Why did that make me so angry? Why did I react to my boyfriend, my girlfriend, my wife, my husband's, my brother's thing that way? Why is it that when I'm in a party, I do this? Why is it that when I'm private, I can do that? What are my self-sabotaging mechanisms? And I'm self-researching. So in other words, what I'm saying is, and the very first thing about your back to school homework is life is your research project. So the first concept I'm trying to say is discipline and laziness that we brought up have no relevance. Because if you have a joy for life, which is why you came to acting, because you want to experience life in its fullest and try to understand it in the most pithy, beautiful, full, profound way you can, then all of it's joy and you're always working. There'll be a time at some point where you just go, that's it, I'm done, I'm trashed, I can't handle humanity and life anymore, and you're gonna go for a big long walk in the woods. But otherwise, the other 98% of the time, you're always an actor, working, researching, living, breathing, studying. And that's exciting. So discipline and laziness don't even factor. You're just always, always, always doing your job. I was right here at my deck. I had a dinner party a week ago, and this gentleman, doesn't matter the long story, but he's a physicist. He's an atomic physicist. He was fascinating. So the first thing is I made him talk all about his work, and I made him discuss a whole bunch of things about Stephen Hawking versus Einstein and things, but I was also studying his backstory and how did he get into it, and I was studying his behavioral mannerisms the whole time. Like it's almost kind of like horrible because you're sort of like not quite in the conversation because you're actually doing a research project. But his thing on the opposite is, as an atomic physicist, he can't stop always looking at everything from a physics perspective. So you should never be looking at anything except from an actor's perspective. Do you understand that? And the actor's perspective is, why is this happening? And who are we? What is this thing called life? And then live it. Now that you're living your life in a way that's all encompassing and one gigantic research project, and that's why you want to say yes to a lot of things, by the way. Have you ever gone skeet shooting off a boat? No. And then they're like, you want to come skeet shooting off a boat? Yes. Sure. And then I go skeet shooting off a boat, which is A, I hate guns, and B is, that sounds really dumb, but shooting guns off a boat when there's gas tanks next to you. But one of the guys was a cop. And to watch this police officer just go and like love shooting off his gun was fascinating to me. And I was studying the shit out of him. If I ever play a cop, some kind of like recessant, tension inside of him. So say yes to stuff. Not that anything is going to hurt you or hurt anybody, obviously. Don't do anything immoral, but you don't need to do cocaine and you don't need to throw yourself off a bridge. But, anything that'll thrill you and scare you a little bit and give you more fuel for understanding yourself and the world, do it. Now, specific work. The specific work that you're doing is intellectual, emotional, and practical. The intellectual, I've already started with. You read, and then read a lot about psychology. So read Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, and read Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, and read David Eagleman, and read Steven Pinker, and read Malcolm Gladwell, and read Gabor Mate, and just read. There's a list of books I think you guys should read that are on the quad. But frankly, anything that's current, state-of-the-art psychology, you should be studying. TED Talks, I mean, you're actors, so reading a Steven Pinker book might kill you, but watch his TED Talk, and then you get the 20-minute, version, and you feel smart and like you read the book. So watch TED Talks. You should watch a TED Talk a day. It's 20 minutes. And Dan Gilbert's TED Talks or Brené Brown's TED Talks, watch these things, and think and about it's any TED Talk that's about the human experience. So on happiness, on emotion, on power, on language, on authority, on connection, on relationships, on love, on death. Watch these things, and read histories and read autobiographies, etc., etc., etc. So that's the intellectual side of it. There's also the intellectual practice. So you should be writing lists in your logbook of verbs and practicing verbs. So you go, oh, that was a great verb. I never really thought of to blank him before, to firebomb him. And that was interesting. What does that mean? And then you start researching the verbs. There's exercises on the assignments page for that. But you look at a verb, you practice it, you go, what does that mean? You could just pull any verb, any partner-related transitive verb out of the dictionary, and then go, to resuscitate him. And then you go, no, okay, so what does that mean to me? And where does that come from? And how does that mean to me emotionally? And practice the verbs. And then what you do, I don't know if this is an assignment on the page, someone tell me, is you take a ridiculous, nonsensical line of dialogue. So we could do coffee at noon. That was a text I just got. So we could do coffee at noon. And then what you can do is you can take 10 of those verbs that you worked out to resuscitate, to firebomb, to enliven, and you take that line of dialogue and you do each action with that line of dialogue. So it becomes to resuscitate. We could do coffee at noon, or it could be to fireball. We could do coffee at noon. And you just take that line of dialogue and you just keep trying different verbs on top of it. And what you start realizing is that what you're saying is far, far less important than the intention or energy behind what you're saying, which is why people can communicate who don't speak the same language. So practice that. That's an example of an intellectual exercise. Incorporeal nouns are incredibly fabulously important. There's lots of talk on those. I think there's a webinar on them. There's also an assignment on them. Grab a concept verb like freedom, power, authority, terror, love, marriage, ownership, insecurity, death, God. Those are kind of the big ones. And you do research on them. What does this mean to the world? What does this mean to me? And what's this concept mean to me? Because incorporeal nouns are what create the two conversations in a scene. Love and responsibility, or death and sacrifice, and so you got to go, what do these things mean to me? So you're practicing those. So intellectual work. The other intellectual work, of course, is scene analysis. So all important. Like, I don't know what to do as an actor today. Like, read a script, read a play, read. But much more important and even better is you read a script. You take a script that you really like, The French Lieutenant's Woman, so an example is on the webinars we just did, The Way We Were. You read the screenplay for The Way We Were. Then you call the one scene that you go, that's the scene I'd really like to study. Then you break that script down, and you can sit with your actor friends and practice scene analysis with a script. So A over B equals B over A, COR, ARC, the certain sense of directive relationship, the arc, realizations, the cutting the scene in three. What are the two conversations? What's the 3-act structure? Who's winning? Who's losing? And break the whole script down. And you go right down to the R&Ds, and you just keep researching the scene and practice it. And when you go, okay, I think we got it. I think we've intellectually cracked the nut of the scene. We understand what the writer has written and what they want us to live through. And we know what the character's actions and what the character's objectives are and the relationship between them. And we understand the scene in full. Then what you do is you then go watch the film. And you're watching the movie, and then the scene that you analyzed happens, and you go, whoa. And we did Charlie Wilson's War in class last night. You can go, that's amazing. Philip Seymour Hoffman's doing exactly what we had analyzed. So, or Meryl Streep is doing exactly what we figured she would be doing. There's no art to it. She's just doing what she's supposed to be doing really well. Sometimes you watch the scene and you're going to go, wow, that's different than the way we analyzed it. And you're going to go, oh my gosh, I think we've misunderstood this scene. Let's go back and fix our analysis. And you practice it in order to go back and go, oh, that's what the scene's about. Sometimes, and you will sometimes, analyze the scene, break it down, watch the scene that the actors, the pros filmed, and go, they missed it. They missed what the scene's about. And if you get to that point, that's great. Every once in a while, you're going to go, oh my God, Jeremy Irons totally misunderstood that scene. And that's cool. Like, it's exciting to be able to be at that level, you know? When you watch a scene that you go, wow, this scene was amazing. It was incredibly well written, incredibly well acted. It's so specific and I get it. Then what I want you to do is to watch the scene again about 20 times. If it's a 3-minute scene, 20 times is only an hour. You're watching movies that are much longer than that. You watch the scene, you watch it again, 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 and you just keep watching the scene over and over and over again. And something really interesting is going to happen as you're doing that, which is you're going to start being blown away by continuity, by the editing, by directorial choices, by the moments, by the behavior, and the ingestion of the behavior of Jeremy Irons is going to get into your head. So do that. While I'm on that topic, another thing that you can do for your homework, which is really important, is watch movies. And we're doing On the Waterfront in class, and one of my 20-year-old students blew my mind when they reminded me that On the Waterfront is 75 years old. So you're watching a film that's blowing you away. That's 75 years old, and that reminded me that basically there's 100 years, a century of genius out there that you need to study. So there's a whole lot of movies, and we're spitting out genius films every year. So every month you're falling behind by about 3 or 4 films that you need to watch. So watch movies. But as I was saying in class, take a movie and you really need to watch it at least 3 times in a row. Like, you take a movie and dedicate a day, 6 to 8 hours, to watch a movie 3 times in a row. And the first time you're watching the film, you're watching it from an audience's point of view. So you're going with the flow, you're being taken away, the plot's affecting you, you're watching the film, and you're enjoying the film, and you're being swept away. Now that you've seen the film, you go back and you watch the movie again right away. And this time you're watching it for architecture. What's the 3-act structure? What's the shifts? What's the changes in the scene? What are the ups and downs? What are the expectations from the audience's point of view? And you're looking at CORARC, and you're basically analyzing the movie now. And once you've looked at all that structure, which is like the larger picture, then at the ending credits, you go rewind, or we don't rewind anymore. You press play again, and you watch the film again a 3rd time right away. And by this time, the story's not going to impress you. You've already done that, and the architecture is really clear to you. Now you can watch the minutiae of the moments of what the actors are doing, and you're going to learn so much at that point about the decisions of where to put the camera, and why the actor turned this way, and why the actor looked that way, and what this moment meant, and the emotional moment of this, and the connection there, and the result. And then you're also going to go, that scene didn't work. Oh, the actor's actually not in that scene very much, or they overplayed this scene, or this was exceptional, or I would have done it this way, but I think the reason why they did it this way. And it's all going to be almost ingested. So yes, part of your homework is watching movies over and over and over and over and over again. Any intellectual work that you can do is great. Go to theater, watch films, read plays, study nouns, study verbs, study psychology. Good. Emotional work, you have your logbook. So like I said earlier, you're logging in any emotional triggers that affect you. So a piece of poetry, a little bit of music, a photo that you found. You're going through your old photos in your storage shed, and you come across a photo of you and a best friend that you haven't talked to in 35 years, and you're like, oh my God. So you're logging down all this emotional work. Another exercise in the emotional, there's lots of them, and there's a bunch of them on the assignments page on the campus. But one that I think is really important is write down the 10 major relationships of your life, including, it's probably your mom and your husband and your child and your teacher and your best friend, but it's also probably the major relationships of your life include that abusive uncle, the alcoholic asshole next door neighbor, and the man that sexually assaulted you. And you write down these relationships, the ones that have affected your life the most, and you write a page on who they were to you or who they are to you. And then you call them and you take them to lunch and you tell them or if you can't do that physically, you do it by email. And if you just can't because it's like a moral legal issue, then you get a close friend and an actor who understands these things, and you tell them like you're telling them. But what you're doing is you're getting clear on what relationships are. So emotions and relationships, you're answering the three major questions. What do you want out of life? Who do you love most? And what's your core beliefs? Like, what is your absolute principles and values? And you keep researching yourself, self-knowledge. So part of your homework is, yes, go to therapy. Good. Now you're practicing emotions, and you should be doing an emotional preparation, a day, really. I mean, you should be emotionally preparing whenever you get the chance. So when something really affects you, then practice it. And when something doesn't affect you, when you're like, oh my gosh, what if that was me? Then you walk away and practice it. Now, practically speaking, as an actor, the homework, once you've done, we're doing all that stuff, which you'll notice that my back to school homework is really live your life fully and experientially, is practice acting, practice. You should be practicing all the time. Like, you're supposed to be an actor. So like a pilot, you got to log flight hours. You've got to log hours practicing on stage and in front of camera. So for God's sakes, there's like 1,000 audition sites on the Actors Campus. Or access sides from wherever you can, from friends or from agents and things. But put an audition on tape once a week. Put yourself under the gun to memorize, practice, break down the scripts. You're going to practice the intellectual. You're going to practice your memorization muscles and your emotional preparations. And then you audition for some friends. You get together, you have a camera, you do it in front of a blue screen, or you do it in front of your refrigerator. It doesn't matter. And you're practicing. It's not for anybody to see. If it ends up being an outrageously great demo audition that represents you in a good business way, then sure, move that over to the business part of our talk. But right now we're talking about artistically as an actor. What am I doing? To practice, put stuff on tape. And then the next thing would be you see a scene that blows you away. It could be from anything. It could be from some obscure, wonderful German film, or it could be the scene from Top Gun. And you're like, this scene blows me away. I want to know what the scene is like. Then practice it like you're in a scene study class or you're going to set, and then get a friend with a camera and then do like coverage in a really simple way. It could be your iPhone, and go to the parking garage and practice the scene, like slamming the doors and rolling around and yelling at each other and feel it out, like practice. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't cost you anything. Like, acting class is a way for you to learn technique and be inspired and to practice and make a community. But a lot of it is practice. It's practice in front of a professional who can give you critique, but it doesn't have to be in class. That's why the AFGs should exist. Get together with groups and do stuff, And I like, as I've said, like, if you're like, I don't know what to do as an actor today, I'm like, go to the corner of the main street of your city, Robson and Thurlow, and perform the monologue as people are walking by. Busk as an actor. Run the scene. If you're running a scene where it's like a breakup scene and you're doing it in a Starbucks in downtown, the police should come and arrest you because you're yelling at each other. Fantastic. You were successful. But practice. Put a play on. So I'm directing Lisa McRae. She wrote the play. She's starring in the play. She got me to direct it. We have an unbelievable cast. It's opening tonight. It's fantastic. Practice. Like, just always be acting. ABA. ABA. Always be acting. Always be acting. Always be acting. Practice. Reading scripts, reading books, intellectually practicing, emotionally preparing, getting in touch with yourself and who you are in life. Studying nouns, studying verbs, then breaking down scripts, and practicing it, and then comparing them to how I break them down or how your friends break them down. And then getting on stages, getting on camera, putting yourself in the audition room, and working. Just working. And if you don't have any actors around you, you got tons of work to do. And if you do have actors around you, then put each other on tape and critique each other, and just take a camera, go to Stanley Park and memorize 5 bits and practice it. Get a camera, memorize some stupid line. Seeing some TIFF movies next week. And that's your dialogue, seeing some TIFF movies next week. And then you practice 15 different objectives and actions with that, and you film each other doing it. That's what you do. And then you And if you don't have any actors around, but you have people who are willing to help you, then have them hold the camera, have them be your focal point. But always be working. There's no discipline in this. It's all joy.